Okay, hi everyone. Thanks so much for coming. So my name's Julia Kotziamani and I'm a love, sex and relationship coach who works, well, predominantly with single mums, but very happy to see single dads too. So yeah, with Frola, I've been doing a few things around single parenting in general, but my main client base is single mums, basically. And I work with people one-to-one in groups. I run workshops and I have online programs and a podcast. So all kinds of various ways to come find me, which I'll talk about later. So yeah, moving on. I wanted to do this session. It's maybe a little bit, we're going to cover a lot, but because this is such a topic where people have really personal relationships with it, and something that won't matter at all to someone will be kind of the thing for somebody else. It would be great if you have any specific questions that you want answering, as Tam says, just come and hit me up, because we're kind of going to go through a little bit, moving on, what that looks like, what that really doesn't look like, how to do that if you feel like you still have some work around that, and you've got things that you maybe need to look at. Some of those can be unconscious. You know, we'll think that we're absolutely fine and we're moved on, and then something can just derail you and you'll suddenly be like, I'm furious again, or I feel a lot of guilt, or whatever. We'll go through a lot of these. And one of those things that happens very frequently is when your kids are introduced to your ex's new partner. That can be a very challenging time for well, probably all parents, realistically. It's a worrying time, a concerning time. So I'm going to talk around some strategies for that. And then I'm going to talk a bit about how to introduce your kids to somebody and when you might like to do that, what feels good, how you would do that with different ages and stages, why you might not do that. Like, there are some options there. So we're going to talk around that, and then some kind of big red flags and problems that lots of us face when we're entering into a new partnership, or thinking, oh, should I introduce my children to this new person? Should I even consider it? You know, it's very, very scary, and there can be problems that come up with that, and some red flags that you just should never ignore, basically. So it's a bit like, it's a bit all over the place, but largely it's about fully moving on, letting your ex move on, how to cope with that, and dealing with maybe bringing new people into the picture. So yeah, get your questions on that ready. I've had a bit of a cold, and I'm also in my 3rd trimester of pregnancy. So if I sound a little bit like, that is because there is a human sat on the bottom of my lungs. So bear with me. Yeah, I'm not just like madly unfit or a really heavy smoker. That's what's going on in my world. So yeah, moving on. I think that all of us feel like we have a process with this, and that maybe like time is the thing that will help us. That's the thing I hear over and over again. Oh, just give it time. Time's a really big healer. And I don't really think that's true. So I want to preface this with, it doesn't really matter if your breakup happened yesterday or 40 years ago. You may not have fully processed it, and that's absolutely fine, normal. And until you kind of do the work with it, that it can come back and bite you at any stage. So pros and cons, you know, it's proactive, which means that you are in control of it to an extent. It's not just kind of happening at you. You do get some control, and there are things that you can do, but also that doesn't mean you have to do some work. It's not just going to fix itself. So if you feel like, oh God, like I don't know what to do, this thing just keeps repeating and I keep playing it again and again and again, then there's lots you can do to help yourself, which is the great news. The other really good news is that though these experiences are very, very personal, and obviously we've all been there, it feels like you're the only person it's ever happened to and is happening to, and that these feelings are so strong sometimes that they are completely overwhelming and you feel very alone. and like nobody in the history of humanity can possibly have felt these feelings, and that's just not true. So rest assured, you are in good company. Like, we have all been there when a marriage or a serious relationship, or even, you know, a not serious relationship, can have a huge and devastating impact on your life when it breaks down. So giving yourself kind of time and grace, and knowing that luckily there's a lot you can do, and luckily there's a kind of universal map that you can traverse. It's not linear, as I said. It's not just going to be like, oh, time, work through these steps. So if you're somebody who loves kind of a very black and white blueprint for something, it's not quite that, but there are stages that we all go through, and kind of three main processes I want to talk about today. Yeah, so let's start. Let's talk about moving on, what that might look like, and maybe some signs that you still have some work to do, which again, fine, normal, even years and years down the line. So that's okay. Firstly, when you have fully moved on, you will feel something close to just peace, right? You'll feel kind of a neutrality. You won't feel huge, overwhelming feelings in either direction. And that's even if there was a huge amount of hurt and abuse or cheating, or, you know, something devastating. When you have fully processed and moved on, those feelings will be manageable. They're not going to affect you day to day. You probably won't even think about it day to day. And yeah, you can choose to respond rather than just react. So I know I can't be the only one who has an ex that, even, you know, nearly a decade down the line, will still occasionally bait me with something that he'll expect a response from. And I knew I had fully moved on when I didn't rise to that at all. It just didn't have as big an impact as I knew it would have done, you know, just a week or two before. And that's when I was like, oh, suddenly, actually, I've done enough of this work now. There's not much, you know, nothing really that he can do that can completely derail my day. And that's what we're trying to aim for, right? I mean, these are people that, by and large, and everyone's situation is different. You may be a solo parent because you've lost a partner, you've been bereaved, or you may have chosen to be a solo parent. But for lots of us, there's a person that we're going to have to deal with to some extent or another for at least until our children are grown and flown, right? So we have to get to a point where this is not a kind of daily source of stress and huge emotion. So signs that you still have some work to do, the obvious ones being, you know you haven't moved on, you're still very sad, it feels very fresh, and there's still kind of sadness or resentment or guilt or whatever it is, big feelings that don't feel, that feel intrusive, and they feel like a recurring theme of your life. You know, we've all been there. Another one is that you can talk way too much about them. And even if you don't feel those huge feelings, if you're bringing them up in everyday conversation, this can be a massive buzzkill if you start dating again, for example. You can talk about your ex way too much. For example, as a general rule of thumb, you probably won't be talking about your ex on a first date. It's like, so if you find yourself doing that, then there may still be some processing still to do. Again, none of this is to shame anybody. These are all completely normal reactions, but when we start recognizing them, we can go, okay, why did I bring them up just now? What am I doing? What does that mean? You still follow closely what they do and have a huge interest in what they're doing in their personal lives. This may be online. I know it can be very tempting to check out what your ex is doing. That's probably a sign that you still have some work to do on letting things go. And perhaps you're still in contact about things that aren't to do with the kids. Caveat to this is if you have an amazing co-parenting relationship, you know, if you have got a point where you just became great friends and that's something you want to keep, then that's fine. But I'm talking about the other side of it, maybe, where you don't have a kind of awesome friendship. You're just you're talking about stuff that maybe isn't entirely relevant to your co-parenting relationship. You know, not like child arrangements, not finance, not things that are to do with the children. And also, you know, people are still sleeping together, or they're calling and leaning on, you know, it depends where you are in this process. It's very complicated to disentangle a long-term relationship. And the last one I've got here is you compare all your new relationships to that one. And this can be a real trap for people. This is especially if, for example, you were cheated on or betrayed in some way. Comparing every single new person to that old dynamic is a sign that you may still have a bit of work to do. So maybe some of those rang true for you. It's a process. You know, are you ever fully moved on? Well, I think yes, but it can take a really long time. So give yourself grace if there are any of those things that sound like maybe there's still some stuff there. Yeah, so good news, not just you. And exciting that you can be really proactive about it. So even if you're feeling, you know, like even if it's been years and years and years, perhaps even decades, if you still have resentment, hurt, guilt, or any kind of expectation, that's another really big one. If you expect quite a lot from your ex, then you may still need to continue doing the work, because even though we're co-parenting often, and we have to deal in a very challenging role as a parent, and it really is, it's, you know, these things can be very complicated. If you're expecting them to behave in a certain way, or you feel like you're trying to control that situation, that can be really challenging. We're going to talk about that later, because I think we all have work to do when we start unboxing where we might be a bit controlling. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. So the kind of process, the three things that I think everybody needs to have gone through to fully move on are, you must feel your feelings, feel them fully, explain them as eloquently as you can, and in as much detail as you can. So really feel them. The second one, I'm just going through these very quickly, we'll go back over them, is that you need to get really clear on what you need. What you need going forward with your life to be able to have a good life. And the third one is to do a bit of a relationship autopsy and some grieving. So, as fun as that all sounds, it is extremely necessary to do these three steps. We can get very stuck at any level of this. So if you don't, for example, really feel your feelings and allow them to happen, you can get stuck. And this is when we see people who go into cycles of, you know, heavy drinking, addictions, anything to stop yourself coping. It can even be like over exercising. It can be something that's sort of technically healthy, anything compulsive, anything numbing. And it, you know, people can get very depressed, and you can get stuck stuck at that I will not feel my feelings, because it takes a huge amount of courage, especially if there's a lot of pain, especially if that pain is unfamiliar and it's come out of a clear blue sky, or if we haven't processed it or dealt with it before in our lives. And those feelings need to be given room. And I'm like, this is a very stereotypical thing, but this is where a lot of men stereotypically get stuck, because they won't allow themselves to fully feel all these feelings, and not just anger, blame, or guilt, the obvious ones, but the nuanced feelings. I feel guilty that I didn't pay as much attention as I ought to have done. Whatever it is, I feel sad and alone. And facing those things and doing as much work around expressing those, putting them into words, can be really helpful at kind of actually working through them. The only way through is through, right? So you have to, yeah, get really vulnerable, even with yourself. I mean, you can work with a therapist. This is a point where like therapy is really helpful, or a coach, or, you know, just a great group of friends. or you can do it by yourself. Journaling is a great way of doing this, or just, yeah, having a conversation with yourself and being like, actually, I feel really jealous about this, and I'm envious that X, Y, or Z has got this out of this deal, and I'm left with this. I feel resentment, whatever. The nuances, there's going to be a big bag of these, and they'll be intertwined, and they won't be that simple. It's not really enough to be like, I'm heartbroken. That's like, we can get a little bit lazy on this. It's a bit like when people say they're in love with someone, and you're like, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? So getting really, really clear with these. It can be really, really heartbreaking, but not as heartbreaking as it will be to continue going around this loop. So take some courage and some bravery and some help for some people if you're not used to getting that vulnerable with yourself and being that kind of emotionally raw and articulate. So yeah, move beyond just kind of simple blame, guilt. Once you feel like you have fully unboxed all of those tricky emotions, you can get really clear with yourself about what you need. So this can be extremely difficult if you feel you are to blame for the breakdown of this relationship. So not for the faint-hearted, really difficult. And I mean blame, not just if you were the one who caused whatever it was that made the relationship end, but also to blame if you just felt like you weren't good enough and that's why they left you. If you are holding any feelings of, I am to blame for the breakdown of this thing, and we all will, if we're being honest, we all have a role to play in the breakdown of these relationships, whichever side we're on, whoever's like the good guy or the bad guy, you know, like this is a really unhelpful way of dividing up relationships in the first place. We all will bring some feelings of guilt or blame or shame, whatever it is. This is the little voice that was like, well, you know, I knew you were unattractive all along, and that's why you're still single. You're single again. Of course you are. And it will be that familiar, horrible voice from usually your like adolescence or childhood, all those insecurities that have come with the breakdown of this relationship, the huge ego blow of this breaking down. You need to contradict that voice with, what do I need? And that can be really hard. So give yourself some time with that, and getting used to feeling your own needs, and getting clear with yourself with what you want. What do I want? What do I need going forward? And this can be very challenging if you're very good at you know, putting yourself bottom of the heap, as so many of us parents are. It's very easy to be the martyr or the victim. It's just really unhelpful, and it's not. It can be a boundary to moving forward and moving on. And what I want to make really clear is that these needs are not from the person that you're no longer with. I'm going to assume here that these relationships are over or need to be over, and you're not necessarily looking to get back with somebody. The process is the same. If you were thinking, I'll do all this work because I actually want my ex back, the process is the same. So that's the good news for you, because moving on is almost the best way to get someone to be reinterested in you. And we'll talk about that in a bit as well. So the process is the same whether you want to move on forever or whether you want to get someone back. I would highly recommend probably not, but either which way, the process is the same. And where was I going with that? The process is the same, and you have to mourn the loss of that previous relationship anyway. So even if you do get back with the same person, that former relationship has to have died a death anyway. That one didn't work for whatever reason, didn't work. So you are not thinking about what you need from your ex or the person that you're moving on from. You're thinking about what you need solo, like by myself. What do I need? I need somebody who's going to make me feel seen and heard. I need somebody who makes me feel safe. I need somebody who makes me feel funny or attractive, whatever the specifics are for you. I need this. And in giving yourself those needs, you start to rebuild your ego, which has taken a blow, like it will have done. Breakups do cause a rupture in our sense of self and our sense of self-worth and confidence. Another caveat to this is I'm not talking about this word closure. And this is the thing that people say they need an awful lot. And so many of us know that that's not a reality, and it can be a huge block, an enormous block. You can say, I cannot move on until I've had closure from this. And it's not only vague, it's unhelpful. And in some ways, not to be brutally honest, people don't owe you closure. You have to be able to find that for yourself. It's very rare that somebody has the emotional intelligence to sit down and explain to you exactly why they ended something with you, or exactly why it's broken down. We don't often have the language to do that. You're unlikely to get it, and it's one of those kind of like mythical unicorn beasts, right? I'll move on when I've got some closure. You're unlikely to get it. It's about being okay, whether that happens for you or not, whether you ever find out why they lied to you, whether you ever find out why they ran off with someone else, why you ever find out how they fell out of love with you, because they might not even know, and much less are they going to be able to talk to you about it. So not closure from the other person. So you don't need closure anyway. You need to be okay. You need to be okay either which way. Right. Enough on that. The last kind of part of those three stages we were talking about is what I like to call a relationship autopsy, and it's horrible, and sorry, but you do have to, and this is even if this was ages ago, you may still need to go back and look at very old dynamics if you didn't do that in the first round. So there's two reasons for this. The first one is that you need to grieve. As I mentioned, it doesn't really matter what happened. You're grieving something when a relationship ends. You're grieving the life that you could have had together. You're grieving children that will never be born, holidays that will never be holidayed, houses that will never be decorated, whatever it is, you're grieving. You're grieving the idea of the perfect family. You're grieving your party lifestyle, whatever it is, you're grieving something. So working out what that is, giving it space to feel those feelings again, going back to step one and having a good feel. So mourn what you've lost. And the second part of that is to take responsibility. And this can be very hard, especially if you are the person who feels like they were the victim. If you were a person who was in an abusive dynamic and you were the abused, you still need to take some responsibilities for that, because frankly, you let it happen. You stayed long enough for this to happen, and that is not a nice feeling, and I have been there, and it's not fun. But that's why you've processed all those feelings of blame and anger and resentment first, because at this stage, when you're doing your relationship autopsy, it's for you, not them, not anybody else, for you to move forward in your life, knowing that you are not destined to repeat the same patterns if they were very negative for you. So why did I allow this person into my life? Why did I stay as long as I did? How could I have let this happen? And taking responsibility for that. Again, none of these processes are without challenges. They're very challenging, and I'm not pretending they're not. But this is the kind of universal map of getting over it. And yeah, so that's how you would break a pattern. And these can be very complicated, and it's so normal to get stuck and go around in circles about it. The very best way to move on is to do these steps and keep repeating them, and to make your life as full as possible. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but like making your life so big that there's no room for these people anymore anyway is a real thing. It really is a real thing. And there's all kinds of complexities to that. People can have very strong reactions if you start living a new life, but you really have to do that. And so you have to build the strength enough to do that and make your own rules. And the easiest way to do that is by having no contact with your ex. Now, we as parents are in a unique kind of situation with this. That's all well and good if you are just dating someone, even if you're married and live together, you can just cease contact, right? You can not talk to them, you can delete their number and block them. We don't have that luxury, which means that these things can take a lot longer. So what you have to do is limit contact. And this is whether they are abusive or whether you just need time to process, grieve, and move on. Limit that contact to very, very strictly child arrangements, just things that you absolutely must talk to them about. And that is, I will pick up the kids then, I will drop the kids then, they are sick, I want to have a phone call. Literally just stuff to do with the kids. No emotion, you can make it very formal, even if that feels weird. And if someone was very abusive or is continuing to be very abusive, then full parallel parenting, which is like a whole other, but like research parallel parenting, implement that. This is what I do. Still, nearly a decade later, it is necessary because every time I stop doing that, things slip back to where they were, because, you know, things have not moved on as they could have done. You are not in control of someone else's process. So if you're dealing with somebody who refuses to move on, which you may well be, then that's your boundary. You set it and you make it as formal and as dry and as like unpleasant, not unpleasant as in aggravating, but unpleasant to deal with you, as it, you know, just dry, formal, professional. That is the closest that we can probably realistically get to no contact, and do that until you don't need to do that anymore, basically. I know that's a bit of a open-ended answer, but do that until it's unnecessary. And that is kind of very quickly the best way to kind of move on for yourself. And that's what you're really doing, because once you've made that almost impossible situation in lots of cases, impossible decision in lots of cases to end a parenting relationship, it is your obligation to move on as quickly as you can. It's your obligation to yourself, your obligation to your children, and your obligation to any future partners. And you will get quite stuck and your life won't flow in the way that it needs to if you don't do this with as much energy and as much effort as you can, because the quicker you do this, the quicker you get to live your life. And that's important for everybody in your family. But say we're a little bit behind. What do we do if our ex has moved on first and we are not quite where they are? And yeah, this can be extremely challenging. What if you are still fully in love with somebody and you're just watching them move on? That can be very challenging indeed, especially if you've had any kind of codependency or there's been control issues in the relationship. It sounds basic, but like, stop comparing. That's like easier said than done, but don't compare yourself or your relationship or your life to whatever your ex is doing. We all know this. We are different people with different people. So even if your ex remarries, that is not you being replaced by somebody else. That is a whole different dynamic. We must recognize in ourselves that we're different in different relationships, right? I'm not the same person now in my current partnership that I was in my former marriage. I'm not the same as I have been with other partners. You are not ever being replaced. Your relationship is dead, right? Either which way. So comparing what you had with what they had will drive you mad. It's not a contest, there's no prizes, it's not a competition as to who can move on first. If there was any kind of competition, it's who can move on healthiest, right? Your responsibility as a parent is to make yourself the healthiest model for your children and their future relationships. So you need to just take that in-house and not look out and compare. On this, knowing what is and what is not your business is a bitter pill to swallow for some people. Again, sorry to stereotype the dads, but this is one that I hear a lot of the women I work with, a preoccupation with what they're doing from their ex. It is none of your business. And this goes for absolutely everybody. who your ex is dating, who they're sleeping with, what they do, what they wear, what they buy, where they go on holiday, new friends they make, new hobbies they take up. None of our business. And that is very challenging, especially if we have been in a marriage, a long-term dynamic with somebody, in which case these things do become very much our business, right? How do you separate that? And the answer is not simple, right? I mean, it's just practice. Is this something that is my business? Yeah, really, really, really tough. So obviously, safeguarding aside, if you have genuine and legitimate concerns for the safety and welfare of your children, throw out what I just said. Like, you have to, obviously, you have a responsibility to protect your kids, but I see it endlessly. That's not what's happening here. People use their children to be very interested and overly preoccupied and controlling in what their ex is doing. So we need to look at ourselves on that, and we also need to look at who we're working with. If you have a good communicative relationship, if you're on good terms, and your ex has entered into a serious enough relationship that they want to introduce your kids to their new partner, then you can have a conversation with them. And you can say, I'd really like to meet them. I'd like to meet them before, after, whenever the kids do. That's fine, as long as you have that relationship. What you can't do is then expect that to be accepted. You know, you don't actually have a kind of defined right to that. And that can be very challenging to take on. You can't insist on it, you can't demand it, and in most cases you can't expect it. So it's fine for them to say no. And that may be to do with their new partner not feeling comfortable with it, and it might be to do with them not feeling comfortable with it. It might be to do with something else entirely, but it is not something that we can realistically expect or demand. And that can be extremely difficult to navigate. So getting used to hearing no is a big one, and not to have high expectations. You can have very firm boundaries, you can have high standards for yourself, but you have to, in a co-parenting relationship, have relatively low expectations. And again, I don't mean so low that you are putting your kids at risk in any way, but you had this child with this person, you have to at some point trust that they too have their best interests in mind. And for the vast majority of us, that will be the case. They're not going to try and purposely hurt the children with new partnerships. And you can drive yourself completely mad trying to control this. So don't do that. It's really is none of your business. Obviously, if your children are a bit older and they develop a relationship with that new person that is difficult and they come to you with concerns, you can have tactful conversations about that and help them navigate through that. But it's not a given that you have any rights to even know who your partner's dating. You know, like, I have no idea who my ex-husband's dating. None. And that's completely fine within our dynamic. He knows that my children live with my new partner, but aside from that, we don't disclose any details about it. It's really none of each other's business. That side of our life, our romantic life, has been separated, and that's healthy for us. You know, it's healthy. Yeah. So how do you go about that? It's easier said than done. Again, don't social media stalk, take the communication break and keep it limited to child arrangements, build yourself a big world, and recognizing your own controlling tendencies. Why am I interested in controlling this? Why does it bother me so much if he's going on lads' holidays? Why does it bother me so much if she's wearing more revealing clothes? Why does it bother me? I mean, and know that it's very normal to get obsessed about this in the beginning. My ex broke into my bank account and called me out on buying sex toys. So, you know, there are extreme versions of this, which I fully don't recommend you go down. But if you find yourself wanting to hack into somebody's emails, phone, you are way off out of healthy. You have absolutely no rights to do that. So we need to look at ourselves and take some responsibility. What am I trying to control that really I'm just making myself crazy with and isn't going to help anything and is really none of my business? And yeah, don't go mad over what you can't control. As single parents, we have so much power given to us in so many exciting ways. We get to define rules without running them past anyone. And the flip side of that is so do they to some extent. And we have to reach a point where we have neutrality about this, assuming that everybody in this situation loves and cares for these children. That's kind of the go-to. Again, there will be extreme examples of this, in which case you may need some more help. And the other side of that is that you need to protect your boundaries. So if somebody is trying to control you and has a preoccupation with what you are doing and is overly interested in meeting your new partners and is trying to micromanage your life and is saying you shouldn't behave like this and you shouldn't do this, and you need to be able to take that and protect it and be very boundaried and be like, no, this is not your business. And this can feel so alien if you come out of a marriage or a long-term dynamic, to tell somebody whose business this previously might have been that now this is not their business. But that is, you have to get really good at that. You have to get really good at just being like, sorry, this isn't relevant. This isn't, I'm only going to talk to you about the kids. And this can be quite extreme. I'm sure lots of us recognize being called all sorts of terrible names, and feeling very monitored and watched. And you just have to stand firm on that and know what is and what isn't their business. This is one that's more stereotypically the mums. So again, I'm not doing this like to gender things. It's just that there are these kind of social stereotypes around, and that is, you cannot use your children to control the situation either. You cannot use your children to get back at them. You cannot use them for revenge. You cannot deny contact because you don't like who they're sleeping with. This seems like it should go without saying, but it is very common. So if there is something that you recognize in yourself, give yourself a break. It's a default reaction. These are our babies, we love them more than anything. It can feel like that's the right thing to do, but you need to constantly be self-reflecting and being like, am I doing this for something to do with me, or is it really for the kids? And yeah, sorry if that sounds harsh, but it happens so frequently that, yeah, we just have to keep in mind, am I saying no to something because it's genuinely a danger to the children, or am I saying no to something because I just don't want something to happen and it's outside of my control? And getting good at recognizing like which side of that you're sitting on. We all have this. We all come with some damaged controlling aspects in all relationships. It's a constant work in progress. So no judgment wherever you sit on that. Even if you are hacking into your ex's bank account to see if they're buying sex toys, that's fine. You are where you are. We're all moving forward from where we are at now. Right. Are there any questions on that bit? Because I'm going to move on to kind of how to introduce kids. So that feels like that's kind of like the X-Files. So if anyone has any questions on that bit before we talk about children.
There's loads of comments in the chat just kind of saying like people feel like they can resonate with what you're saying. They are kind of giving their own examples. So it's definitely hitting home. I know there's one question here that has been sent directly to me. So it's a question for Julia, please. A recent breakup from a long-term relationship. He is not the father of my kids. It was mutual, but we both agree we couldn't make a future together. We couldn't join our two separate lives together successfully, but we both said we don't want to lose each other. Any tips on how to maximize the chances of maintaining a friendship with this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I slightly query whether that's necessary. There are some amazing post-relationship friendships, but quite often that's not what's happening. It's somebody trying to hang on to something, or whether that would be healthy for you, whether that's something that you feel like you can manage, bearing in mind that in friendships, people sleep with other people and fall in love with other people and build families with other people, which is something that doesn't always happen in romantic relationships. In terms of maximizing friendships, I mean, you have to get to a point where there's as little resentment, disgust, anger, any of the negative feelings as there can possibly be. I would do the same process as we talked about before, which means like limited to no contact, working through that relationship, processing those steps that we talked about earlier, feeling all the feelings, grieving what you've lost, because that side of your dynamic is done, and taking that space to really mourn the loss of the romantic partnership before turning it into a completely different platonic relationship, which is doable, but that's why it's so hard to turn. People think you can kind of just smoothly switch from trying to be in love with somebody to trying to be a friend with somebody, and so rarely is that the case. I think what's really important is that we as parents don't take on too much guilt about dynamics ending. I know loads of women I work with are like, this isn't working out, but because I've already separated from the father of my kids, I can't put them through it again. And I think it's really important that you recognize that, one, you're not solely responsible for any relationship you're in, any intimate partnership, and two, your kids are already, they're already used to that. And sometimes the healthiest modeling we can show our children is leaving and moving on. And I think that that's something really spoken about and underrepresented. You don't ever have to stay for the children. Marriages can work like that. There are marriages where people do just stay for the kids, but that's not, that's usually an excuse not to do the heavy, difficult work of building a healthy relationship, which it is. I mean, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. But it is, it's hard. It's almost the easy option to say, I need to keep this person because my children have developed a bond. And yeah, as I just said, sometimes the healthiest example we can be is somebody who moves on, processes, builds healthier futures, learns from those mistakes. So yeah, the process would be the same, and then you can come back to it as a friendship if that is really truly what you both want. And bearing in mind, you both have to want that. You can't force a friendship on somebody who still wants a romantic thing, and you can't force a friendship on somebody who wants to go and not see you again. So I hope that answered that.
No, that's great, thank you. I think that's the only kind of question on that. I think a lot of people are just, like I said, everyone's kind of sharing their experiences, which is really nice, with each other, and kind of answering a lot to your points and going, yeah, that's me, yeah, I've been through that, yeah, I've been there. So
yeah, we're all humans and we're all extremely flawed, and we all have the potential to be extremely healthy and extremely unhealthy depending what's going on. So good. I'm glad some of that's resonating with you. So yeah, I know we've only got like 15-ish minutes, but I wanted to touch on briefly, though this is hugely complicated, obviously, when and how you might introduce your children, because there is a huge array of ways and hows and whys. So the very short answer is it's up to you. I know that's really unhelpful, but you know your family better than other people. What I will say as a complete rule to this is that it's really important to remember that not all relationships take one trajectory, and we don't talk about that very much. We all assume that we date seriously, we have kids, we marry, we have kids, and we stay together, or we divorce, right? We need to not assume that every date we go on is looking for that. So when you kind of open up your idea of what healthy relationships can look like, you recognize that some of them are shorter term, some of them are longer term, some of them do turn into friendships, some of them turn into deep and meaningful, sexually impassioned things that we didn't realize would possibly be there. I mean, I met my partner years ago, and like we yeah, completely like friend zoned him for the very longest time. And I feel like we need to understand that not all relationships are going to be appropriate for our kids to march into. However much we like somebody and however much we want somebody to co-parent with us, even if we want to remarry and have more kids, that won't be everyone in the room by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a kind of yeah, there's a sort of hierarchy we have as a society of what relationships look like and what good relationships look like. And lots of those involve, if you have kids, finding somebody to have your kids with. So really important to remember that not all relationships take the same path. And when you recognize that, then there is no kind of, there is no roadmap for how this is going to work. But much more exciting than that, you get to deal with the people that you're actually dealing with. So you get to deal with your children, not children, not even children of an age or children of a gender or children of a background. You're dealing with your children. And in the same way, you're dealing with the partner that you are thinking of introducing with. So humanizing that, first off, is a really good place to start. How will my child react to this? How will my partner react to this? So there are some factors. Age, obviously, if your children are extremely small and have no concept of adult romantic relationships, you're going to have to do this very differently from if you have a 16-year-old who knows full well what you're going to be getting up to with this person. So you need to, like, again, understand your children. Do I run a sex positive household? Do we talk about sex? Do we talk about consent? Do we talk about grown-up relationships? Do my children, have they met previous partners before? Is this something that they're kind of used to happening? I know there's kind of a lot of trash talk about people who bring partners in and out, but the reality is that for some of us, that will have been the case. We will have introduced people to our kids and then that didn't work out. And what you do with that is be the healthiest model you can be, right? Be the person who learns lessons. How open are you with your kids about that? How open are you with them about your feelings and your emotions? And yeah, this is the stuff that's kind of hard to give you a uniform answer for, because you're dealing with your particular dynamic as a parent, and we all do that differently, and our children are all different. So some things, like I'll give you some things. So for example, in my situation, I have lots of friends, like male friends, who come in and out of my house. I'm not sleeping with them. They're platonic male friends, but my children, who were 3 and 5, I think, when I met my current partner, they were very used to seeing adult men around my house at all hours of the day and night. I mean, I'm not like, as I said, I'm not sleeping with all these people, but I had quite a vibrant social life, which, being a single parent, oftentimes happened at my house. So it would not be unusual for them to see an adult man in the house. If you have not dated or had male friends for the last decade and your kids see an adult man in the house, that's going to be way more shocking for them. So you have to bear in mind what your kids are used to. If you're a dad and you've never ever introduced your child to a woman, that's obviously going to be a much bigger deal if they're 15 than if they're 2. So bearing those things in mind, what are my kids used to seeing? What's going to feel normal to them? Yeah. How understanding are they about what adults do in relationships? And remembering that each of these dynamics is distinct. So once you have decided to introduce somebody, remember that that person, however many kids you have, is going to have their own relationship with each one of those children, as well as yourself. It suddenly means that it's not just like you and person and children, because we all know that's not how parenting works. That's not really how anything works. Those dynamics are going to like be crossing over and can be very complicated. So I wouldn't get too disheartened if initially it's quite challenging, and quite challenging for you, quite challenging for your partner, and quite challenging for your kids. They're learning how to build those bonds together. So creating a space where you can talk through those feelings alone is really important, and lots of parents forget to do this. They're so caught up in their relationship or like worrying about how to introduce kids that they forget that those kids need to have time to express their feelings and share with you. So creating a really open discussion about how they're feeling about it, age appropriately. Do you like so-and-so? Do you feel safe? Is it okay if they stay, if they're a bit bigger? Do you mind them staying over? Would you like to see them this weekend? And that goes for the kids and your partner, because as single parents, we're extremely independent. We run our own lives, and we should be proud of that. You know, we've built a world, we've built our own homes, we've built our own situation for our kids, and that's one of the greatest assets of being a single parent. But it can mean that at times we kind of dominate and assume that we're in charge of this, and we forget that our partner has to really want to meet these kids too. So, you know, this is not your decision. This is like your decision as a partnership when this should happen, how comfortable they are with it. Yeah, let them move at their own pace. So what I said to my husband now is, I like, you know, I want to be in this relationship. I see this being something long term. The door's kind of open, and I'm going to let you navigate that. You know, I trust you. I would like my kids to develop a relationship with you, but I'm going to take a step back and let you feel that out and see how comfortable you are. And obviously I had conversations with my kids as that was going on to check in that they were okay, but really let him lead that. Because he was the external. You know, I've already got a great relation with my kids, that's easy. Like, he was the one that was going to have to come in and build these new roles. So taking like your foot off the gas can sometimes be the most healthy and helpful thing to do that. Yeah, and it's just really normal for these things. You know, sometimes he is exasperated by them, like all parents are. You know, he's lived with them now for 3 years, and eventually you have to just kind of like give over control a little bit. If you really do want to co-parent with someone, you have to actually let them do that, because otherwise you'll find yourself in a position where you're kind of like micromanaging everyone, and it's so stressful. So yeah, letting someone kind of feel that out as well, and keep talking and checking in. In terms of like things to never ignore though, like this is really, really important. It's important to keep in the back of your mind always that there is the potential risk of harm, right? We would be really naive not to mention that. Step parents are much more likely to be abusive to children than biological parents, and people within the household are most likely to be out of anybody. So it's not a very nice thing to think about, but we have to keep that there. Always keep that there. And you can get so swept up when you're in the throes of love with somebody that you stop listening to your kids. And you need to not do that as a parent, basically. You have to continually check in that your kids are happy and healthy and well adjusted, even if they're having a difficult moment, you know, like they've had a little fallout or a scrap like families do. You need to make sure that there is an open channel that they can come to you if they are genuinely upset. Domestic violence, obviously, of any kind, even if the children are not there. So if somebody is prone to being abusive only when the kids are with their other parent, like, it's a red flag. You've got to do the process of getting yourself safe and out of there. People who try it on for size. So there's another one. If you open your door and somebody isn't quite sure, they can dip in and out. And if what you're looking for is commitment, you have to be able to express your needs. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about knowing what your needs are and being really clear that that you're not interested in someone kind of playing dad for the weekend and then going back to their regular life. Or mum or whatever, playing the girlfriend, the spouse, just a bit and then leaving again. And it's not on you ever to try and control or change somebody's mind. So if someone comes to you and says, I don't want to be around your kids and I don't want children in my future, do not sit around trying to persuade them otherwise. It's not fair on you, it's not fair on them. These are kind of huge deal breakers. That, you know, having kids is hugely life altering. I wouldn't wish it on anyone who didn't want it. I wouldn't. You know, the flip side of that is you can get so caught up with someone that you start neglecting your parenting and you start not being the best parent you can be. And we don't have that option as people who are already parents. That has to be always kept in your mind. So keeping a kind of level head, even when we're kind of passionately falling in love with somebody, is challenging, and it's something that people without kids don't really have to do. But yeah, importantly, you're not solely responsible for these relationships. It doesn't make you a terrible parent if you have yet another failed relationship. That risk is largely invented by ourselves. So take some comfort in that. You don't have to get this all right now. I mean, it's all a process of working on it and aiming for as healthy as we can be. I hope that was like helpful. If anyone has any more questions, like I'd love to answer them if you have anything specific.
Yeah, that was so helpful. That was brilliant. Thank you. I think it's a question we get a lot of comments on the app, and a lot of questions kind of in various meetups, especially around like, if I do start dating, how do I bridge that with my ex? And like we said before the meetup, what if my ex starts dating? How do I cope with that? So it's definitely something that comes up a lot. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to go through it and kind of give us your input. It was really helpful. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I don't know if Julia, if you want to just go through where people can find you, how they can connect with you across socials, and then if they go away and digest what they've listened to and have kind of questions and thoughts, they can come and find you.
Yeah, by all means. That was an awful lot of information. So if you're if a kind of question comes to you over the next couple of days, then by all means come and find me. So my surname, if you can see on my little box here, is atrocious. It's a Greek surname, so all of my online stuff is with that atrocious surname. So it basically, I'm on Instagram at Julia Kotziamani. I have a website, juliakotziamani.com. You can email me from there. You can slide into my DMs appropriately, and you can come and find me. I also run a podcast called MILF School, where I kind of talk with lots of different, women essentially. Lots of single mums about their different experiences of single motherhood and how we can start building our self-esteem up and dating better and more excitingly. So yeah, come and find me on those. And I'm running a dating confidence workshop on the 1st, I keep forgetting this date, so I'm just going to find it, the 7th of November. So it's a Sunday, and it's all about how to get ready to date a bit more excitingly, more fun, getting the confidence back if it's been a while, or we're not used to dating, or we feel a little bit frightened and insecure. So yeah, you can come and find me on that as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. I've had some really nice comments sent to me, a couple direct and a couple in the general chat. People kind of saying this has been excellent, very refreshing. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story. Really informative. Thank you so much. Really good to hear out loud what I thought I knew, but definitely needed the reaffirmation. Yes, I need that session. So yeah, really, really positive comments. Really lovely.
Oh, great. That's brilliant. Well, thank you for having me, everybody. And yeah, come